All right. Thank you everyone for joining me this afternoon. So our session will be developing instructional designers with active learning. My name is Paul Lynch. I was actually talking about earlier, I always like to know where I'm going. So I wanted to provide just a little roadmap for our session today. So first we'll go ahead, move into the session learning objectives after this slide. Then I'm going to provide a more extensive introduction and background on myself, just to kind of set some groundwork for some of the things I'd like to talk about. Then we're going to move into professional interactions as active learning activities. Then I have a group activity, and I'll talk about how I'm going to split that up here in a little bit. And then we have a little bit of time, or we should have a little bit of time. I'd like to just hear about some of our suggestions, just some things we took away from this activity that we'll do together. And then there will be some time for a short question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So our session objectives, we have 3 of them. First, determine the skills instructional designers will develop from various learning activities. Second, identify methods of active learning for developing instructional designers. And third, analyze how engagement and participation in active learning contributes to the professional growth of instructional designers. So just to kind of talk about myself a little more, Paul Lynch, I have been an instructional designer since June of last year. And I work in the Instructional Technology Resource Center at Idaho State University. And before becoming an instructional designer, I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about this background here. So last year, I attended QM Connect as a virtual attendee. And it was really, I had a lot of fun with it. I learned a lot, especially as a younger instructional designer. And something that really stood out to me was there were a number of presenters that had a background similar to mine. So some kind of performing arts and specifically in music, just like, oh, wow, it's kind of cool to see other people who have this similar background to me that are in this field right now, that are doing, what I was striving to do, what I wanted to work towards developing myself as. And I just want to point out, I actually had some conversations yesterday and today about some other people with that music background who are in this space. And it's so cool to be able to connect with people in that way and just to see how music has influenced their own development as instructional designers. But my background primarily was in music education and performance. This is what I did all my, I'm a trombonist by trade. Yeah, I see you. Yeah, so specifically I play bass trombone. I did my master's and my doctorate in trombone performance. And part of that was building up a studio, developing relationships with the middle school and high school music educators in the area. For me, I was at Arizona State for both my master's and doctorate. So working with those educators and working with the students in those communities. That also involved gigging. So just doing different types of performances, brass bands, symphonies, Broadway shows. And so maybe to take those things that I did, so there was lesson planning, people management, outreach. It's starting to sound a little more familiar, maybe some of the things some of us do from in our day-to-day, right? People management, project management, right? Because I know instructional designers, we all wear a lot of different hats, right? And part of that also led into this nonprofits arts management experience. So when the brass band's down in Phoenix, the Salt River Brass Band, I had the pleasure of being their principal bass trombonist for, I think, about 3 or 4 years. I served on their board as a member at large, vice president and president. And again, at that time, those are just things that I needed to do following that path towards developing my career as a young music educator with the goal of being specifically a collegiate music instructor. Um, then it was very poorly timed when I graduated with my doctorate, because then that following March, COVID hit. And I always like to tell people, it was one of the things I heard going through school is like, you want to like develop these different skills just in case, the worst case scenario happens. Well, as a performing arts musician, the worst possible thing did happen for me, right? I no longer had a venue to perform. We all saw like the different types of solutions, which were very creative. And I participated in a few things, but it was also nice to move back into live performing and doing it in a live space for real actual people. But kind of building off this nonprofit experience, right? So part of that, I did some social media engagement, large scale projects, budgeting, contract negotiations, education outreach. I was really fortunate at the time we had a little drought in our education outreach. And one of the pros that came out of COVID was I actually got to shape the like redeployment of our education outreach. That's something we'd been missing for about 7 years up until that point. So I was really, really proud of the fact that I was able to put our younger musicians in a position to go out to the schools and get those experiences, but also to get something for their efforts. I felt like that was something that was really important that I wanted to strive for. And then that takes me to kind of the odd one out, informatics trainer. So between, after I was kind of done with my time in Phoenix, we had an opportunity to move up to Boise, Idaho, where my wife and I are originally from Montana, and we really wanted to get back to the Northwest. We felt that was home for us. And so we had this opportunity and we took advantage of that. During that time, the community college I was teaching at, we were our second year of full remote teaching. And that was at the point where they were, that next academic year, that would be 21-22, they're looking to move back to in-person. So that employment was no longer feasible for me to retain. And so during this time, I was like, you know what? I have like these bits and pieces of like something. It's like, how can I put all these things like together into one thing that isn't music related? And so this wasn't the solution, but it kind of helped, I guess, put me on the path towards where I wanted to be. And I got this informatics trainer job. It was a contracted job. So we had a local hospital network that was switching EMRs, electronic medical records. And so, wow, talk about being super, super uncomfortable. But I really appreciated that because I had to learn this thing I was really unfamiliar with. And I specifically had to work with adult learners. Some of them were really enthusiastic and were like, yeah, this is great. Thank you so much, for working with us. Thank you so much for like showing us these different workflows, how we can use this in our day-to-day. And others were less enthusiastic. And I have a feeling we can all relate to that less enthusiastic adult learner in some of our interactions with our faculty. But it was a really great experience, and I took a lot from it, especially like being uncomfortable, because sometimes we get some support calls and it's like, oh, I'm not really familiar with like the course content, or maybe we're working with a course we're developing for a longer term project. And it's like, oh, okay, I can't let the content get in the way. I need to look at, alignment, quality, accessibility, like try to block that out. And focus on the things that are important, that are paramount to a quality online experience. So anyway, I have all these bits and pieces, right? They're kind of scattered in a few different directions. And that takes me to last summer when I got hired on at Idaho State University. So I've been there for a few years, going back to attending QM Connect last year. I did a one-on-one with my supervisor, and we were talking, like just kind of following up, just like, oh, what kind of things, did you get from the virtual sessions? She was talking to me about, some of the things she took from being there, some, the connections she made, the things she talked about. And there's one idea that she had. And she's like, you know what, Paul? It'd be really interesting if you talk to people about how to develop instructional designers. Here I am only a few months into the job. I'm thinking it's like, that's the silliest thing. What would I know about like developing instructional designers? I'm very, very green at that point, right? And so like, I was laughing about it, and we were kind of haha, yeah, it would be kind of funny when it would be really interesting. But to her credit, she kind of planted that seed. I kind of sat on it for a little bit. I was like, maybe could I do it? I don't know, maybe like I was kind of thinking like, I was still taking in a lot of information. I was still doing a lot of like shadowing, or I was doing a lot of partnered work at the time, really still trying to get familiar with our LMS, some of our department culture, university culture, what things, what are common problems? What are problems that I should ask for support on? We do have a very collaborative team. So that really helped me settle in. But then I had this like aha moment. I don't remember when exactly it was. It was about like the end of January. And it's like, what if I think about it? It's like, okay, we have all these things, like, especially if you're like new to a job, kind of like taking yourselves back to like when you got like that first instructional designer job, or maybe you recently got a new job at a different institution, right? There's still a bit of an onboarding period, a time where you have to like familiarize yourself with what's going on there. And I was like, you know what? This is no different than the things we talked to our faculty about. Like, how can we engage learners in active learning? Their goal is to learn this content and to come out of the course being able to satisfy, these module and course level objectives, right? So I was saying, it's like these things we do, these shadowings, these one-on-ones, that's no different than the things we're trying to do with our students. So that's where I got this idea of thinking about developing our instructional designers through active learning. Help if I held it the right way first. There we go. So, specific review standard 5.2 states learning activities provide opportunities for interactions that support active learning. Some things in the annotation that I want to draw our attention to. Meaningful interactions that promote learners' development of skills are designed as activities to support the course objectives and may vary with the subject matter, purpose, and level of the course. Look for the purpose of the interactions and not just the number of opportunities for interactions. Opportunities for active learning reflect the diversity of learners' characteristics, backgrounds, and abilities. Activities designed to ensure quality in learning experiences may include but are not limited to offering a choice of activities where possible, giving learners autonomy over their role in collaborative work, and providing learners opportunities to apply their own experiences and prior knowledge to solve real-world problems. So I kind of already touched on it, but now I want to talk about these experiences again, these shadowings, partnering projects, doing these one-on-one meetings with my supervisors or people who are effectively like mentors to me in this field, right? These were all activities that I was a part of that were opportunities for me to engage in active learning. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to take some of these interactions and put it through that lens for developing instructional designers in a professional setting. So what I did was I changed the type of interactions. So the first one, instead of student to student, I have instructional designer to instructional designer, and I'll go into more detail about what each of these entail on the next slide. The next one is instructional designer to mentor, and then instructional designer to faculty. The first thing I want to note, and I'm sure some of you picked up on it, is like there isn't one that has to do with instructional designer to content. And I thought a lot about that, and I felt like there's enough difference with the interaction for instructional designer to faculty that I specifically wanted to highlight that type of interaction. However, I think it would still be beneficial to consider that in the future. So maybe like as a continuing exercise, you could apply that lens to instructional designer to content. So things like professional development workshops, writing, help articles, etc. So to look at these different interaction types, first I want to look at instructional designer to instructional designer. The frame I put this through was a newer instructional designer partnered with another instructional designer. I considered these to be kind of on similar levels, right? Like this, I guess, pre-existing instructional designer, you know, there's some familiarity with the institution, the workflow, the culture. They're familiar with you know, some problems that you may encounter, different approaches that they may be taught, but they're going to be kind of on a similar level, someone that can really like show this person kind of the ropes, right? The next, instructional designer to mentor. This one I wanted to leave a little wiggle room. So this could be, they could be partnered with like a senior instructional designer, or they could be partnered with a supervisor or a manager. So really, this is someone who has a more substantial understanding about team, department, and organizational level goals. They're going to really have an idea of like, okay, we see these talents and these skills, and they're going to kind of steer this instructional designer's direction. It's like, we see you have this talent, the skill, or like, you know, we notice that, you know, maybe the skill could be cultivated a little more, right? Maybe we need to develop these other skills that maybe, I hate to say the word lacking, but just need that to be cultivated just a little bit more, right? And then this third interaction type, instructional designer to faculty. So this could be like short-term support. So something like a just-in-time training, email support, phone support, just something that's really kind of short, quick. You know, I don't want to say basic court support, because sometimes they ask for help and it's like, oh, maybe we should schedule additional meetings about this. But ideally, that's what that short-term support would fall into. Then we have long-term course development. So that would be things like at ISU, we have the Quality Plus program, which is our localized implementation of the Quality Matters Higher Education rubric. So something that lasts longer, you're going more in depth, you're talking about quality design, quality course design, and how faculty can implement that in their course. And then the other thing is, just because it's so, your interactions with faculty is so diverse, that's going to give that instructional designer different approaches to course design. They will run into many different problems, and therefore they're going to have a lot of different solutions to different problems. Each faculty or department they may work with is going to have different goals. So you're going to start expanding your scope of understanding from department or instructor, department to department, and you know, maybe even broader and institution level. And then preferences to course design. Certain people, you know, everyone's an individual, or you know, you may be working with departments like we want this specific design. We want it to be holistic from the first course they take in our program to the last course they take in our program, right? You're going to really be exposed to a lot of different preferences. And I think that's really helpful. The more you see, the more tools you have in your toolkit, right? So now, before I get into some of the things I want to highlight from my experience, I want to kind of prep you for our activity. As I'm going through my own experiences, I want you to be thinking, okay, when I was a newer instructional designer, what were the things that I was doing that helped develop me, like within these different categories? So looking at my experiences from instructional designer to instructional designer, I was partnered with several different colleagues for different faculty development programs. So at ISU, we have a course called Teaching Online in Moodle, and we call it TOM. And what we do, it's kind of this intersection of what tools are built into Moodle, and what kind of quality design can you put in your course? So thinking about alignment, assessment, just those things. So it covers a few different things, but being on that teaching end, so going back to my informatics experience, being a little bit uncomfortable with some of the stuff you're teaching, but also being in a position where it's like, okay, I need to, start wrapping my head around this stuff pretty quick, because I'm going to get some questions and I need to be able to provide faculty that guidance and support that they need. That particular course is an 8-week course. And it was a really helpful experience. I actually just wrapped up my second time facilitating that course. And every time I always feel like I'm taking a lot of new things out of it, but it also serves as an opportunity for me to work with my colleagues and a little bit of an informal assessment, like what kind of things do I feel like I understand better, or what things it's like, okay, maybe these things fell through the cracks, right? So I almost get that ability to like provide my own self-reflection, right? So that is initiated by myself. So I can kind of keep track of those things. So then the next time I facilitate this course, be like, okay, I shored some things up, and then, I'll go through the course again. I'm going to learn a lot of other things, or I will be assured in some of my development, be like, oh no, this was great. Like I really, shored up my knowledge on particular topics. And then being partnered on projects is like a co-lead. So like I was talking about course development. I was partnered with other colleagues with this long-term course development. And so even though there's a faculty member in that mix, really working with that, like an instructional design partner, that allowed us to talk through some problems, to troubleshoot some things together. I got to watch them work through different problems and see how would they talk through things, right? Because each faculty member is different. So then I get that opportunity to review, okay, what tools do I have that worked well for me? What things do I maybe need to change a little bit? How can I approach, faculty members who aren't as amenable to specific solutions? Like, how can I find that middle ground to ensure that quality is being built into that course, right? But this also includes other things. So we have a weekly webinar series that goes on during the fall and summer semesters. So I've worked with different colleagues on that and other different course redesign projects. So we also have like a 101 level course for new faculty members or faculty members who just want to learn more about Moodle. It's called Setting Sail with Moodle. So we recently redesigned that. I did that with 2 other colleagues. Wonderful, wonderful experience. The next thing I want to hit on is instructional designer to mentor. So for me, I am fortunate that we're in a place that I am able to do regularly one-on-ones with my supervisor. And we're generally touching base every 4 weeks, talking about, it's like, okay, how are your faculty members doing? What problems have you come up with, or what questions do you have? So I really get that time to pull out like those questions or, things I just don't understand or need help, with my own development, right? So I get that time to reflect with someone who can kind of provide me with answers and or resources so that I can learn for myself. And something that's also been helpful is I think with kind of steering me in certain directions, like, what, I find like I'm really interested in like this particular subject or like this thing. How can I like take that and make it beneficial for like myself, for my faculty member, for my colleagues? And so it's like, have you considered like this like workshop or this workshop? So like in addition to any quality matters workshops. So that's been really helpful for my own personal development. And then facilitating that faculty professional development with that mentor. It's been, so what we do is we rotate who the facilitators are. And I've been fortunate to facilitate teaching online with Moodle with my supervisor twice. So that's been really helpful. And it's been every time it's very, very insightful for me. And it always kind of like, okay, like I need to put these things on my radar. So if you're in an opportunity where you can do something like that, I think that's really helpful. It's been very, very, very insightful for me, especially as I continue to get more comfortable and start like developing interest in my own specific opinions on things. And then next is instructional designer to faculty. So some of the things I've done with this is I've actually done a few onboarding meetings with our faculty into our Quality Plus program. So it's really just an overview. It's like, here's kind of our program. Here's the things we do. Here's why it's valuable for you. Here's why it's valuable for your students. And that's been really great because that puts me in a position where I actually have to communicate the value of this program. And it's one thing to be like, okay, like I know it, like I do it, but then to have to get that faculty member across the line to be like, yes, I am interested. That is a whole nother challenge, but it's also communicating it in a way. It's like, I was in a session earlier where they were like, yeah, there's like, 44 standards we're going to review your course against. Like, that's not going to get people across that line. So really just like, it's like, how do I communicate this? And doing that gets you to communicate the importance of quality in different ways, right? Because that's where you learn. Faculty, just like it takes different things for different people to be like, oh yeah, I'm interested, So I think that was really valuable. As I got more comfortable with working in partnered groups, I was starting to get assigned my own one-on-one faculty partners. And this has been really helpful because then it kind of puts me in charge. It's like, I'm the person who has to help this faculty member grow and like see what they're doing in the course, be like, yes, these are some quality things you're already doing. Or it's like, what, there's some really great ideas here. Let's cultivate this a little bit more. Let's see how we can make it more quality oriented in your course, right? It's taking those roots and just nourishing that a little bit more. And that's been wonderful. I've enjoyed, bless you. I've enjoyed all the faculty partners that I've had, and I've learned a lot from them. And I think I'm going to continue to learn a lot from them. And then that support and just-in-time training. I'm going to say this. It feels like a pop quiz sometimes, every time I get one of those questions, because sometimes it's like, how do I change the total points in a quiz? I learned that one. I'm never going to forget it because I had to call my supervisor in to answer it. And she's like, oh yeah, it's right here. And I know I will never forget that now. Thank you. It's just like one of those things. It's like, it's in a little different place than everything else. But it's just good to get that, or like questions about like grade book or headers, or it could be like, oh, my layout's a little weird. Can I get some help with that? That's where it's like, let's schedule an additional meeting. I don't know if we can do that in 15 minutes. But having that context and putting that knowledge into practice, very, very, very valuable and very helpful. Okay. So next, what I'd like to do is we're going to get into this activity. And what we'll do is we're going to break up into groups. So when I initially visioned this activity, I figured I'd be in a wide room and not a long room. For our friends who are joining us online, I do have a space for you, and I'll get to that in the next slide. But what I'd like to do is we're going to split the room in half. So if you are about in this room, we have a TV off to the side. If you are behind that TV-ish, so Mark, I'm sorry you're here. So if you are behind Mark, you're going to be group 2. If you are in front of Mark, you're going to be in group 1. And if you're online, you're going to be in group 3. I'll tell you what that means here in just a second. But I would like for you to say hi to a neighbor, talk about what some different experiences you had in these different types of active learning scenarios. So there will be instructional designer to instructional designer, instructional designer to mentor, and instructional designer to faculty. Those will be the 3 types of active learning situations I want you to talk about that you've had. We'll spend, I think what we'll do is just so I make sure we have enough time to share and ask questions about it. We'll go ahead and keep it to 3 minutes per interaction type. So we'll spend approximately 9 minutes total on this activity. And then at the conclusion of the activity, what I'd like to do is if we could have just like 1 or 2 people share. So maybe if I could get like 1 or 2 ideas from like the group 1 people, 1 or 2 ideas from the group 2 people. And then for online, maybe we can keep an eye on chat, or I'll have the Jamboard open. We'll figure that out just so we can make sure our online friends are involved. But then to do that, we do have some QR codes. And then if you're online, we'll have a link placed in the chat. So again, group 1, if you're in this front half, on the front side of Mark, you'll go ahead and use this first QR code. Group 2, anyone behind Mark? Thank you again. Yeah. We'll use the QR code for group 2, and our online friends, if you can use either the QR code for group 3 or the link in the chat. And we will start with so it should take you to a Jamboard. There should be a yellow sticky note that lets you know how to add a sticky note to that Jamboard. If you haven't used Jamboard before, think of it as a digital wall to place sticky notes. So I'll make sure everyone has a minute to get in there first. And then for anyone here who's in person, if your phone isn't catching it, feel free to go ahead and move closer to get that. But again, we're going to start with that first interaction type, instructional designer to instructional designer. And I'll go ahead and give you 3 minutes for that first one. We're going to go ahead. If you haven't already, we're going to move on to that second one. Instructional designer to mentor. So you have 3 minutes for that. really quick, I have just one thing real quick to interrupt you all. If you're in group one, so if you're in the front half of the room, on the left-hand side of your screen, there's going to be a bar, and it should be the fourth icon down is a note that's or icon for adding a sticky note. It was just brought to my attention. The group one slide or the group one Jamboard doesn't have too many sticky notes on it. So just in case you needed. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So just wanted to let you know. All right, we are going to move on to our, I don't know if everyone heard me for the second one, but I'm going to give you a minute or two to write down interaction types for the second one, instructional designer to mentor, and to get to that Jamboard page at the very top of your screen. There's a little slider. There's an icon. It should say 1 through 3. It looks like some people added some Jamboard slides, so it may say 1 through 5. But go to slide 2, and that will be our Jamboard for instructional designer to mentor. And I'll give you about a minute before we move on to the next one. All right, thank you. We are going to move on to our third one, instructional designer to faculty. So go ahead and go do that third Jamboard if you're using it. Instructional designer to faculty, 3 minutes for that one. I'm going to give you your 1 minute warning. So just go ahead and start finishing up those thoughts, about 1 more minute. All right, that is the end of our 3 minutes. If you can just wrap up that last point, that's the end of our 3 minutes. All right, that is the end of our time. Next, what I'd like to do is I'd like to move on and give each of the groups an opportunity to share. And so what I'd like to do for group one, I know we have a very large kind of collective unit, but do we have like 1 or 2 volunteers from group one who would like to share something about, let's go and do this, instructional designer to instructional designer, about some of those interactions you discussed? Anyone from group? Perfect. Is it okay if I come to you so our online friends can hear? Awesome. So again, this is for instructional designer to instructional designer.
We just talked a lot about some of the things that instructional designers struggle with faculty, which is just building trust and rapport with another ID so that they feel, so that a newer ID feels safe and comfortable when they have questions, that they don't feel like they're, that it's frowned upon to ask questions, that questions are welcomed. So we talked about that, and there are some other activities here on the board that would be good in establishing that kind of rapport and trust. So I don't know if anyone else wants to mention those.
Would anyone else from group one like to expand on that? Absolutely. That's okay. Here you go.
Thank you. So something that was valuable for me earlier in my career, I was transitioning out of teaching. And one of the last things I did as a faculty member was develop an online course with an ID. So if you have an opportunity as a newer ID to develop some kind of course in your LMS with an instructional designer, that might be a valuable opportunity.
All right, group two, I'm coming for you as someone who is perpetually a back of the classroom person. I'd like for you just to give you like a 5-second heads up. The second type of interaction, so instructional designer to mentor. Do I have any volunteers who'd like to touch on or share any of those type of interactions? Anyone? I can also go to the Jamboard. I'm going to go to the Jamboard. Unless someone, last chance? I'm going to the Jamboard. Okay, so some of the things we came up with for in group two that instructional designer to mentor is, let's see here. Identifying growth areas and coordinating professional developments together. Again, another supporting that one-to-one meetings, practicing effective communication. Absolutely, right? And then positive development of implementing DEI storytelling into communication or community recreation course. So some really great ideas there. And then what I'm going to do is for, let's get that right group there. For our friends who are joining us online today, I'm just going to go ahead and read a few ideas that they posted on their board for that third type of active learning, instructional designer to faculty. So we're saying providing research evidence-based practices, course development meetings, working with faculty when they're preparing for a QM review, bridging for different LMSs for our adjunct faculty partners, instructional videos, reviewing project steps, organizing meetings with specific tasks and check-ins. These are all great. So for everyone who participated in this, thank you so much. These will be available for you to view. So if you wanted to come back to these Jamboards, you will be able to have access to all of them. There's really a lot of great ideas in here. So next, I wanted to make sure we had some time for Q&A, and It may not be a lot of questions, but does anyone have any questions? Yes, can I give you the mic just so?
Yeah, so it's not really a question. But the interactions between instructional designers and faculty, I think that's a really interesting place for interactions, because I think that we have a tendency to think of those as very formal interactions and necessarily formal interactions. But the university that I work at is the same university that I did my undergrad and one of my graduate degrees at. And some of the faculty that I most frequently help are the faculty that I had as professors as a student. Additionally, a lot of my closest friends are faculty teaching at the university. And so I think that it is worthwhile to remember that we are members of our individual campus communities, and there's a lot of informal opportunities for us to interact with faculty and advocate for the work that we can do for them outside of our more formal classroom interactions.
Absolutely, thank you. Right, I think that goes to what we had mentioned earlier when we were going through and reviewing the ID to ID. It's like, how do you establish that trust, right? And sometimes it's just those little bits, planting those seeds, watering the soil. It's just all of that little bit is going to help build up that relationship so that you can actually develop that trust. Thank you for sharing. That's really insightful. Does anyone else have a question or a comment they'd like to share? Maybe just to make sure we get out on time. Just one more. So anyone else, a comment or a question that they would like to share? Going once, going twice. Do we have anything from our online friends? Awesome, thank you. So some things that I would like to address is like, okay, so now we have this. What else can we do with this? We kind of have this all like laid out. We have these different interactions. It may be helpful to look at, it's like, how can we document this? How can we use this for our own personal growth, right? Because that's not anything I provided. I kind of looked at these different interactions, right? So I think some next steps that you could take is looking at your own interactions. Like, where are you at? Are you on the mentor side of things? Or maybe you straddle both lines. Maybe you're an instructional designer who's also a faculty member, right? But what can you do to like work on your own development, or what's something that you can do to help your colleagues in development, especially if you're doing like some partnered activities, right? So I guess those are some things you can do. And again, going back to the instructional designer to content interaction that I did not include, it'd be worth exploring that. Seeing it's like, what kind of things are there outside of, workshops or writing help, your support articles. There's definitely a lot of room for exploration and growth. And I think based on just what I heard and what I see in the Jamboards, a lot of us have some really awesome ideas, and it'd be cool to come back next year at QM, just be like, oh, like, how did it grow? Like, what were you able to do and cultivate? How are you able to like better yourself or bring things to your department? Those could be really, really interesting conversations to have, and some things to take from this, some actual things to take from this. But again, my name is Paul Lynch. I'm an instructional designer in the ITRC at ISU. My email is just my name, paullynch@isu.edu. If you have any questions, comments, you want to get in touch with me about any types of these interactions, instructional designer development, it's something I'm really interested in. I'd love to have that conversation with you, but you can always reach out to me or just pull me aside, go in between sessions. But again, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it.